Hey everyone, and welcome. Think of this as our fun little study group for PP 5375. That's Economic Analysis for Public Policy and Management. Today, we're tackling the readings from Section 02 on the fundamentals of supply and demand and Section 03 on elasticity. We're going to be pulling straight from our Pindyck and Rubenfeld textbook and the class lecture notes to build a really powerful toolkit for policy analysis. So let's jump right in with a puzzle from the textbook that honestly seems kind of weird at first. Between 1970 and 2010, the real price of eggs, adjusted for inflation, actually fell by 55%. Meanwhile, the real price of a college education shot up by a whopping 82%. How does that even happen? It might seem totally random, but we're about to see how it makes perfect economic sense. And here's our game plan. First, we're going to master the basic tools of the trade, the core ideas of supply and demand. Then, we'll use that exact toolkit to solve our little price puzzle. And to wrap it up, we'll see how we can apply these concepts to analyze a major public policy debate. To solve any mystery in a market, you've got to start with the two fundamental forces that are always pulling and pushing, what people want to buy and what people are willing to sell. This is the absolute heart of the supply and demand model, which our textbook calls the workhorse of microeconomics. Okay, first up is the demand curve. This is all about us, the consumers. The law of demand is super intuitive. You already know this. When the price of something goes up, we generally want to buy less of it, right? So as the price falls, the amount people are willing to buy goes up. And that's why the demand curve always slopes downward. This slide from our lecture PowerPoints shows it perfectly. Just look at the demand for coffee. At a high price, say $12, people only want about 100 pounds. But you drop that price down to just $2, and suddenly the quantity demanded jumps all the way to 300 pounds. It's a really clear inverse relationship. Of course, it takes two to tango in a market. The supply curve shows us the other side of the story, the producers. And for them, the logic is totally flipped. A higher price means more potential profit, which makes them want to produce more. It might even convince new companies to jump into the market. And we see that same logic right here for our coffee producers. At a low price of just $2, they're only willing to supply 100 pounds. But if that price climbs all the way up to $12, they are ready to bring 300 pounds to the market. So the higher the price, the more they supply. Simple as that. Okay, this next part is absolutely crucial, and it's a place where a lot of people get tripped up. When the price of the good itself changes, we just move along the curves we already have. But when some other thing changes, like our income goes up or the cost of raw materials for a company changes, the entire curve actually shifts to a whole new position. Getting this difference is the key to understanding why markets change. So we have these two forces working against each other, right? Buyers want low prices and sellers want high prices. How does the market figure this out? Well, it finds a balancing point, what economists call equilibrium. Equilibrium is that one single, special price where the amount producers want to sell is a perfect match for the amount consumers want to buy. They call it the market clearing price because at that price, everyone who wants to buy or sell is happy. There's no leftover stuff, no one's left wanting, and there's no pressure for the price to move. And here it is on the graph, that beautiful intersection point. That's our sweet spot. Now, think about what happens if the price is too high, up at P1. Well, sellers have a bunch of stuff they can't sell. That's a surplus. What do you do when you have too much stuff? You have a sale. You lower the price. And if the price is too low, down at P2, you get a shortage. Buyers are scrambling over limited goods, which naturally pushes the price right back up. The market is like a self-correcting machine, always pushing back towards that equilibrium. Okay, we have our basic tools ready to go. Now it's time for the big payoff. Let's circle back to that starting puzzle about the eggs in the college tuition and put our new supply and demand framework to the test. First up, eggs. Two huge things happened at the same time. On the supply side, as Pindyck and Rubenfeld explain, new technology and automation made it way cheaper to produce eggs, so the whole supply curve shifted out to the right. But at the same time, people started getting more health conscious and worried about cholesterol, so the demand curve shifted to the left. You get a massive increase in supply and a decrease in demand. What's the result? A huge drop in price. Now, for college, the story was the complete opposite. The costs to actually run a university, from fancy labs and libraries to paying good professors, went way up. That shifted the supply curve to the left. At the same time, way more people decided a college degree was essential for a good life, so the demand curve shifted way out to the right. Less supply and way more demand, you guessed it, a much, much higher price. And there it is. The big takeaway here is that these wild price swings weren't random at all. They were the totally predictable result of these fundamental shifts in supply and demand. Our simple model cracked the case perfectly. Now, knowing which direction a price is going to move is incredibly powerful. But for real-world policy analysis, you often need to know more. You need to know how much it's going to move. If we put a tax on something, by how much will people actually cut back? To answer that, we need one more tool in our belt: elasticity. As our lecture notes define it, the price elasticity of demand is just a single number that tells us exactly how responsive or sensitive consumers are to a price change. Basically, it answers the question, if the price goes up by 1%, by what percentage does the quantity people want to buy change? So, how do we figure this out? The lecture notes give us this formula for what's called arc elasticity. I know, it looks a little complicated, but the idea is actually pretty clever. Instead of just using the starting point or the ending point as our base for the percentage change, we use the average of the two. This just gives us a much more accurate measurement of elasticity over a range of the demand curve. Let's make that formula a little more real. The lecture notes walk through an example for gasoline, where a price increase from $3.60 to $4.20 causes people to buy a little bit less. When you plug all those numbers into that ARC formula, this is what you get: negative 0.68. So what in the world does negative 0.68 even mean? Well, since the absolute value, just 0.68, is less than 1, we say the demand for gasoline is inelastic. In plain English, that just means we're not very responsive to price changes for gas. Think about it. A 10% jump in the price of gas isn't going to make most people drive 10% less. We still have to get to work, right? It's a necessity, so our behavior changes by a proportionally smaller amount. Okay, we've done it. We've got the full toolkit: supply, demand, equilibrium, and elasticity. Now let's put it all together and see how these ideas are just absolutely essential for analyzing real-world public policy. This is where we go from the textbook to the real world. Our notes give us this beautifully simple 3-step framework for looking at any change in a market. Step 1, does the event affect the buyers or the sellers? Is it a demand or a supply thing? Step 2, does it cause them to buy or sell more or less? Does the curve shift right or left? And finally, step 3, just look at the diagram and see what happens to the price and quantity. Let's apply that framework to something really complex and controversial: the war on drugs. Now, as laid out in the PowerPoint slides, a huge part of this policy has been focused on the supply side, trying to intercept shipments, destroy crops, and impose stiff penalties on suppliers. So let's run through our 3 steps. Step 1, these policies target suppliers, so they definitely affect the supply curve. Step 2, by taking drugs off the market, they reduce the overall supply, which means the curve shifts to the left. And step 3, our diagram shows the result. The quantity does go down, which is the goal, but look what happens to the price. It goes way up. And as the source material points out, this higher price could have a really serious unintended consequence. It might actually encourage more crime as people try to pay for more expensive drugs. And that brings us to our final thought for the day. Our analysis just showed how a policy focused on supply can have these really complex, maybe even counterproductive effects. So this leaves us with a critical question, the kind a policy analyst has to ask. What would our same toolkit tell us about shifting the demand curve instead, through policies like education or treatment programs? And that right there is the power of this framework. It gives us a clear lens to analyze any problem from any angle.